So hi, One of the Good Noise podcast. I'm Shane,
I'm Glory.
and we're here with,
I'm Cory from Free Throw.
and we're gonna ask some questions today. I'm gonna start. So, what inspired the creation of the band, and what does the band name mean?
Um, the band name is kind of one of those things that we just chose randomly.
Mhm.
I think originally we were going by the name Langoliers, which is like a Stephen King reference.
Oh,
And we went to play like one of our earlier shows, and I guess another band like a town over was called the Langoliers, and they like showed up thinking that they were playing the show. It was kind of like this weird confusion thing.
wait. So they showed up to your show. Like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe we just forgot that we scheduled this.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
And so after that, we were like, well, I guess we got to pick a new name. And our bass player, Justin, was just like, you know, for emo bands, like sports names are pretty common. He's
Yeah.
like, what about Free Throw? And I was like, yeah, it works. Sounds good to me. And we just kind of rolled with it. The band itself was created as just kind of like a random spur of the moment, kind of drunken idea between me and one of our other guitar players, Larry. We were kind of just hanging out one day and listening to records in like my parents' basement and having some beers, and decided to write a couple songs on the spot. And then my brother Justin is our bassist. He got home from work and we're just like, hey, you're in another band now. And the original idea of the band was just to kind of not to tour or anything, more so to like be just the local band that opens up for bands when they come through town, like
Mhm.
DIY shows. So that
Yeah.
way, you know, because we were broke and we didn't want to have to pay to get into shows. So we figured, you know, why not like write some songs and get in there?
Exactly.
And it kind of just like took on a life of its own after that. It wasn't ever really intended to be this like career path or, you know, full-time thing. It just kind of happened.
That's the best kind of explosion, though. It didn't mean to happen.
Exactly. Wait. So you started it as just a joke kind of idea when you were drunk, and then you ran with it because you were like, oh, we can get into shows for free.
Yeah.
And then you were like, wait a
Basically.
second, we're actually making this into like a job. So
Yeah, kind of. I've been touring for like 4 or 5 years before that, off and
Mhm.
on, and really trying to make the whole like being in a band thing work.
yeah.
And, you know, as much as I had tried so hard to make it work, it just kind of wasn't working out. And I was
Mhm.
kind of like fed up with the idea of like, man, you know, maybe it's a pipe dream, you know, stuff
Mhm.
like that. And so whenever we had this like random idea to start the band, I was just like, at first I was like, well, as long as we don't tour, I'm totally down. You know, I'm trying to like get a job.
Yeah.
And Larry was like, yeah, you know, that's fine. And so we recorded our first EP because we were like, you know, we'll probably get on more shows if we actually have music to show people.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Might help.
And so after we put out that first EP on Bandcamp, it just kind of got more popular, I guess, than we intended. And
Mhm.
we started getting asked to play shows in other states. And at first I was like, oh, okay, like going down from Nashville to Birmingham, Alabama, it's like 2 hours. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's not that bad.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, I was on a 2-week tour.
By
And so
accident.
How did I get here?
I was just kind of like, well, here I am again, back on the road.
Yeah. You can't
And
escape
from
it.
there, yeah, we haven't stopped touring since then. So it kind of just happened, kind of just fell back into it. And I think it's really funny how like the one band that wasn't intended to be like a career path or
Mhm.
wasn't intended to like really, we like, this is going to be something that people enjoy and we're going to really try to make this band work,
Yeah.
was the one that ended up being my career.
Exactly. It's like trying to watch like a pot of water boil. If you're watching it, it's not going to boil, but then
You
as
gotta
soon as
walk
you
away
look
for a little
away,
bit.
exactly, yeah, it's going to start boiling. That is amazing. I'm so happy it still worked out for you.
Yeah,
That's-
we've been a band now for next April, it'll be 10 years.
Oh my god.
So
God
it
damn.
ended up
Big.
lasting a long time.
Are you guys going to do a 10-year anniversary tour for that first Bandcamp EP?
Yeah.
You know, we just recently got the like masters for the Bandcamp EP because we thought they were lost to like, you know, computer crashes and the test
Yeah.
of time. We recovered them, so we like re-released it on vinyl.
Mhm.
And I think we have some stuff that we're trying to plan out for the 10-year anniversary of the band. So
Okay.
maybe, I'm not sure. We'll see.
All right.
Okay. I'll keep my eyes peeled then. So congratulations on your newest release, Piecing It Together. How do you felt the response to it so far?
I honestly, the response has been pretty overwhelmingly positive. As with any band not releasing like their first record, you get some people that kind of compare it to the last records, or stuff that you've put out that they like have had time to like super connect with.
Yeah.
And they're always at first kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of on the fence about it.
Mhm.
But for the most part, a lot of the reaction I've seen and a lot of the opinions I've seen about the record are really positive. I'm extremely excited about it.
That's awesome.
As you should be. Yeah.
Hell
It was
yeah.
a banger. I got a chance to
Thank
listen
you.
to it. It was amazing.
What made you choose Cloud Sick as the lead single for the album?
Well, like with the last few records we did, there's kind of like this whole formula that we would go with for the first single on the record, which was kind of like, it's the catchy like punk rock song on the record, I guess, with like Brandy I and the Liquor, and then the Corner's Dilemma on our last album. It was like it kind of followed this whole thing that we would do, where like the first single would always be like this punk rock, like faster, catchy song. And the next thing will be something a little different. And this time we kind of wanted to do it differently. We wanted to like pick one of the songs on the record that we felt like best encompassed like everything that the record kind of had on it.
Yeah.
Like that kind of put out the kind of like broad definition of what we would consider a free throw sound into the first single, rather than going like, this one's like the cool catchy punk song, which would probably be the second track on the record, Worry Seed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That was like my first initial like, this is probably going to be the first single, I guess. But we kind of like bucked that traditional idea, and we're like, let's take the first song on the record that really kicks off everything, and let's just make it the first single. And I'm really glad that we did that, because the response to that song in general was really, really good. I really enjoyed that people were excited that we had like some more of like the noodly earlier emo guitars that was really prevalent in our earlier stuff, but still had like a strong, powerful chorus that became a little bit more prevalent in our later stuff. And it was just a nice mix, so it felt right.
Awesome.
It's great. So is there any meaning behind the album name or cover art?
Well, we had been talking about doing like cover art that kind of represented our city for a while, because like we felt like a lot of people didn't know or realize that we were from a place like Nashville, which is like country music, and it's or like it's this place where like celebrities like to move all the time, so
washed up celebrities.
There's not like it's like LA, it's like downgrading from LA, I guess.
Oh God.
They can't afford to live in LA anymore.
LA light. Yeah.
And it's truly starting to make Nashville more expensive. And I've lived here my entire life. I'm born and raised in Nashville. So like it's strange for me to see like how much it's evolving as a city, and like how much more expensive it's getting.
God.
But we had talked for a while about really wanting to kind of like do something to do with the record that would kind of like represent home to us. And this was kind of the perfect record, I guess, for us to do it with, because of the fact that like our records that came before this one all kind of told this overarching narrative and story throughout the entire record, and the songs were like plotted out in a way to where you could hear the story as it advances. And with this record, as a lyricist, I kind of like diverted from that, because it felt like the last three records like kind of like summed it all up.
Yeah.
And this time I wanted to like not handcuff myself to like having to do this overarching narrative, and just more so let each song tell its own story.
Okay.
And so I was like, since there's no, overarching narrative, this is like the perfect time for us to do, a little bit of like a nice like salute to home,
Yeah.
And so Kevin, I think, came up with the idea of the album art initially, and then we had our friend Ben Lieber do the art direction, and he suggested Michaela, who did the illustration, and it just all kind of like came together really fast, but it was super awesome. And I was super excited about it. And I think that's really what the album art kind of represents. It has a lot of little Easter eggs and stuff in it of just like home for Free Throw and what Nashville represents to us. And also like what, you know, it's got like little buildings and stuff of places where we always hang out, you know, pre-pandemic, obviously, but like the places that we hang out and like the venues we used to play, you know, when we were younger and stuff like that. And so we just wanted it to kind of like have this, you know, overarching feel of Free Throw to it. And so that's how that kind of came about. And with the record title, even though there's not like this storyline overarching narrative to the record, it's definitely got a theme. Like the record's theme is kind of like about, you know, after, because our last record was about me kind of coming out of this deep, dark place and finally feeling like I was getting better mentally and starting to better myself as a person. And it was like this triumphant ending of like, yeah, I'm better now. This is great, you know? And, but the truth is with life, you know, you don't just get better and like, you're better for the rest of the time.
Yeah. And then it's all
good.
good. Yeah.
There's no finality to it. I mean, life is a constant wavelength of just like ups and downs. So I wanted to, you know, write this record about that because of the fact the last record almost ended on this, like, for lack of a better term, like a naive, like, I'm better now, this is great kind of, you know, ending. But the truth is afterwards, it's about maintaining a balance, you know, and, you know, being careful not to let yourself sink back down into those dark places, but also, you know, understanding that you're going to have those good times and like those great moments. And so that became like the theme for the record. And so when we were trying to decide on a title for the record, we were trying to like think of it just like, cool, well, all the songs tell their own story, but they kind of form this one big thing. And instead of you know, there's no title that really needs to go to like make it work with like a narrative, you know. So Kevin was like, I don't know, like putting it together. We
So
were like,
close.
That's pretty good. And we just kind of like kept saying different words until piecing it together came. And then we were like, well, that's also works because, you know, this record is kind of like a puzzle of us kind of figuring out exactly what we want to be as a band and putting it all together. And that just kind of like happened.
Wow.
That seems to be the story with our band. Things just kind of happened randomly.
Just
Yeah.
spur of the moment.
So can you tell me a little bit about your writing process for this album?
It was a little bit different this time around. We had originally planned to do another record, you know, after the tour we were on right as the pandemic started. And because of the pandemic happening and the tour ending early, us going home early and not knowing when we were going to be doing stuff again, we ended up getting a lot more time to write and kind of like take a step back and focus on a lot of things that normally we wouldn't get to because of the like constant grind of touring. Then you like tour, you write, you tour, you go to the studio, you tour, and then you put out a record, and then you start the whole process over again. And there's never really any room to just kind of breathe and like take it all in. And I think for this record, we kind of got to like take a step back and like view things in a little bit more of like well, we don't know if we're ever going back out on tour at this point. So we're just going to like, you know, make a record that we like and, you know, kind of pay attention to the little details and like fine tune and stuff like that. And we really put a lot of work into it because our normal writing process is like we get together, you know, someone has a riff and then we like kind of start building off of it. And then we'll like iPhone memo it, you know, or something. And then I'll go home and I'll start kind of working on lyrics over the top of it. And as I build lyrics, we'll change things in the song. So we really work as this like unit. There's no like one core like songwriter in the band. I mean, when it comes to lyrics, I write all the lyrics, but as a band, like we write all of the music and put the music to the lyrics and shape the music around the lyrics together. So it really is like this unit that we all kind of like work as one. And
Mhm.
with this record, it was a lot more interesting because of the time that we had and like you know, we weren't worried about like what tour we were going on next, or, if we were going to be doing a support tour or a headline tour or like any
Mhm.
kind of that like normal band stuff you have to worry about. And so it just became like a really reflective moment with all of the songs and like really taking the time to kind of make them the best we could. And it also, ended up being times where we would be like Kevin would track out some drums on like an electric drum kit and then send them over to me, and like I would start tracking some guitar on stuff. And it was just odd, I think, as a process. Not odd in
Mhm.
a bad way, but just odd. It's like peculiar
Yeah,
uh
different.
compared to what we usually do.
Mhm.
And I'm happy though. I think the record turned out a lot better because of it. It's like the one bright side I have to like you know a world-changing pandemic is at
Yeah.
least it gave us a chance to take a step back and focus on our art and our craft.
Mhm.
Definitely. It's good. It's good. So how did the track list come about for this album? Did you write the opener to be the opener, the closer to be the closer? Did you just kind of shuffle it, listen through a couple times?
Yeah, well, as with the opener, I think that kind of happened once we had the song recorded and we kind of listened back to it. We're like, this would be a really good opener for the
Mhm.
record. Because in our past records, I would usually write like an opening track, like a softer song that kind of gets really loud, and it's like this introduction to the record.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But since we were kind of bucking that old process of writing a overarching narrative for a whole record and telling this one big story, we were like, we don't have to do that this time. So we were just kind of like, I don't know, we'll figure out which song's going to start the record. I think we kind of had an idea of what song was going to close the record.
Mhm.
Because when we wrote that song, I think we all kind of looked at it ourselves and we're like, yeah, that's going to be
That's
like
it.
the last song on
Yeah.
the record.
Yeah.
Uh, but the interlude that comes right before that song was originally a riff that I had started writing just in case we needed that opening track.
Okay.
Like just in case we got there and we're like, we don't have an opening track.
Yeah.
I was gonna be like, oh, I'm here to save
I
the
have
day.
one.
Got a
I
backup.
have one in my back pocket.
Exactly.
Always
And
prepared.
it ended up kind of working that way, but in a different way, because we were listening to the record and like as we were making it, and Will Yip, who produced it, we were like talking to him. He's like, this record is just like banger after banger after banger after banger.
Yeah.
He's like, we might need something to kind of like give you a moment to breathe there somewhere. And I was like, back pocket time. This is my time.
Yeah,
to shine.
I got it. Don't worry.
And so I like recorded the riff really quick and sent it to him. And the next day when I got to the studio, he already had drums like mapped out to it and
Yeah.
stuff, and was like, this was perfect. Great job. And I was like, yes.
Okay, great.
So you actually mentioned a couple times that this album isn't telling like a full story actually compared to your past albums actually. Did you feel like having it like that was a bit more freeing while creating the record, or was it a bit more difficult because you didn't have like a loose template this time?
It was absolutely more freeing.
Okay.
I didn't feel like the need to have to write any songs that were transitional
Mhm.
or like had to like, because I would, in the past I would have these songs that like told big climatic parts of my story, and because like all of the songs are about my like real life.
Yeah.
It's very like heart on your sleeve, like open diary type of music,
Mhm.
and but there was always these like big climatic moments, but they don't necessarily interconnect. So it would be
Yeah.
like thinking about like smaller moments that I could use to interconnect, all the songs. And it kind of like put me on this track to where I would have to like kind of almost in an essence make filler tracks in order to
Mhm.
tell a complete story. And like almost like, say like a movie like on the editing room floor when they have to like decide what cuts and stuff to use in order to make things transition. It became a lot more like that when writing in
Okay.
that aspect, whereas this time it was just like I didn't feel like I had to, necessarily make every track interconnect. And I think it made it a lot easier for me to take a step back and get a little more poetic at times with my lyrics, and, be able to, write a song without having to think about, okay, if I write the ending of this song about this, that means the next song has to begin with this, or it became a little bit more like each song became its own painting rather than a part of like this really big painting. And the record is more of like a collection of works rather than a bunch of pieces making one big work. And it was nice. It definitely was freeing for me because, with the last few records, that was the process that I was used to. And this time around, it was nice to kind of just be able to go, you know what? I really want to write a song about this. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Exactly.
And not have to worry about how it's going to fit, and I loved it. I honestly, because the 3 records that came before this one all kind of make this bit of a trilogy, I guess, with its stories interconnecting and intertwining within each other. And then with this one, it was kind of like, it still is about the same story. It's still about me and like the stuff I've gone through in my life. But I felt like with the finality of the last record, I didn't have to like make this huge story. And instead, I just kind of, used a theme and just went with it.
Yeah. That's good.
So you weren't like planning on writing the album as like a story at any point? Because I know you said you guys were planning on, you guys already knew you were going to write an album before the pandemic even hit. So was this going to be the plan kind of no matter what? Or was it because of the pandemic you were like, we can write it like this?
We had definitely, like, before the pandemic hit, we had talked about it because we knew the time was coming up when it was like, okay, time to make a new record. It was my cat just fell off the windowsill.
Oh no.
It was, he's fine.
Okay.
It was, it was like this, it was the last record on our Triple Crown Records contract, and so we're contractually obligated in the first place to do another record. I mean, we wanted to anyways, but so we were kind of like, well, it's, new record time is coming up. And we talked about like what we wanted to write about and stuff. And I think almost all of us were just kind of like, let's try something fresh this time. And I was like, what if we just don't do the whole overarching story thing this time? And everybody was like, yeah, let's do that. I think they all kind of had the same opinion as me, is that it would like kind of open up doors songwriting wise to not kind of like already from the jump kind of like trap ourselves in this box. And that's not to say that like the last records did that to us. It's just more so like after we felt like we had already kind of told this big long story that we wanted to, it just felt nice to kind of try a different way for once.
Definitely. Will you be continuing?
But it was there pre-pandemic. I think the pandemic just kind of like reinforced it a lot.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
So I want you to pick your favorite lyric off this album and tell us the meaning behind it.
Ooh, okay. I think my favorite lyric is in Ghosts in the Routine. And I think it's the two different like bridges into the pre-chorus kind of thing. Like an actor that is playing a role, convincing everyone this is who I am. For months I've been convincing them all. I can't even think of the actual words right now. It's like a muscle memory thing. When you start to sing it, it like all of a sudden comes back. But that line about being an actor that's playing a role, especially in a song that's about having to put on a face every day when you're not feeling completely yourself, or feeling down, or feeling like you don't want to have to be this happy person, but you still have to go out and kind of do your thing. And like, it becomes a part of like your daily routine of like getting up and getting ready for the day, is like, especially when you're in that mindset, it's like you get up and you start going, okay,
You are
I have
happy.
to not make everyone think that I'm terribly miserable at the moment.
Yeah.
And then in the second verse, it switches to the lyrics of like a chameleon with its camouflage on. I'm com- I'm convinced them all blend into the place I dwell. Uh, for months I've just been for months I've been concealing it all, masquerading behind a veil. And I just really like those lyrics because I feel like it was a way of being able to be metaphorical and poetic without being like, drab and being like, oh, only I know what this means. It was still very hard on your sleeve and very blunt and forward, but still kind of like a nice, pretty way to say it. It was the one time when I was writing lyrics for this record, I kind of gave myself a pat on the back. Like, your English teacher would be proud, dude.
Send the album to them.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So what song off this record took the longest to write, and which one is your personal favorite?
I think my personal favorite is, at the moment, it kind of like flip-flops all the time. But Ghost in the Routine, I think, is my personal favorite at the moment. The one that took the longest to write, Trust Fall, it was a really hard one to put into words because of its subject matter. And, dealing with the idea of someone who is possibly suicidal and having friends in the past that are no longer with us, and I think it was just really hard to write that song because you really want to touch a subject like that with as much like grace and finesse as you can, because it's such a touchy subject in the first place. And trying to find the words that I wanted to say in that song was a little bit harder than I think I initially expected, because I would write things for it and then kind of be like, I don't know, I just don't feel like this conveys what I'm trying to say enough, or it's kind of like, it makes it seem like it's not this big deal when it really is this absolutely huge deal. And it took me a while to get that one right, but I was once I finally got it and figured it out, and with the help of Will, kind of like changed a few things here and there, I was really happy with it. But yeah, I think that one probably took me the longest.
Right.
Mainly just because of the subject matter.
Yeah. You don't want to be too blunt with it, but you also want to make sure it's like it still gives the right message. Yeah.
So
exactly. And that's like another reason. Sorry.
No.
That's like another reason why we didn't give that song like a reference title or like some kind of like funny title, is because like it would feel weird to give something with such a like important subject matter some kind of like ridiculous funny title or some kind of reference to a TV show. So we really wanted to go with just like a straightforward title on that one. And I think that when you said, you want to be careful and not, be too like just blunt and everything, that reminded me like of how we were actually like having a hard time titling it, because it's just one of those songs that, when people hear it, I was kind of scared that people would still like take it a different way than I intended it, because it is just like a really touchy subject matter.
So where was your headspace at while you were writing this album?
It was in like a much better place than it probably has been in past albums. But at the same time, with everything going on in the world the way it was when we were recording this album and writing this album, it was kind of hard to judge, because there were days where I'd feel really off. And there were days when especially in the studio, there were days when I was like, this is awesome. I'm like living my best life. But then something random would happen, pandemic would get crazier. It did. It kept getting crazier. Or at the time I was really, and I still am like really into politics. I don't really talk about it a ton, like, like into the public, it's kind of like just something that I'm personally interested in and I keep an eye on all the time.
Mhm.
And politics were like getting really extremely crazy around that time. And like, whenever you're someone who deals with anxiety and has, issues with, depression and, your mental health, and everything is starting to just like go crazy around you and being extremely unstable, it causes you in a way to be kind of unstable. Because a lot of people, in general, you're kind of a product of your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think during that time, it was just, when I think back on it, there were definitely times when I was like kind of off during the process. But I think overall, I was in a pretty good mind state. I know when it came to like writing the songs and doing my best to perform the songs, my mental state was great. I was feeling like way better about this record than I have, usually going into the studio. I'm like extremely nervous.
Yeah.
And like, oh man, like, I hope this is good. I hope we make a good record. This time I kind of already knew that we had something pretty good on our hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I was extremely comfortable in the studio. But I think in like my personal life, my mental health was a little up and down throughout that process. But that's a really good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I have to think about it a little bit.
So how do you recommend your fans to listen through this album for the first time? Do you think they should turn off the lights, put on some headphones, just kind of separate themselves from the world to listen to it? Do you think they should go in the car? Do you think they should hang out with friends while they listen to it? What would you suggest?
I do think that the record is a record that can't be played like if you're hanging out with your friends and stuff. But if you really want to get like the intended, like what the record is intended to kind of say or be about, I would highly suggest just like finding your comfortable space, that area where like it doesn't have to be like a direct focus, but maybe like the place where like, nothing's going to distract you.
Yeah.
But you also can just like relax and kind of take it in. I think art is best consumed and observed whenever you yourself are kind of comfortable, because your mind tends to like kind of open up a little bit, and it frees you of like having any kind of preconceived notion. I mean, don't get me wrong, some art is definitely made to make you uncomfortable, but this is not one of those, that's made to make you uncomfortable. So I'd say like find your comfortable space and kind of like and take it in. I highly recommend that, if people have listened to our records in the past, going into this record, even though it is still fundamentally a Freether record, it seems like every time we put out a record, everyone just compares it to the last one. And that is completely understandable, because I mean, it's human nature to go, okay, well, their last record sounded like this, So, but I highly recommend people go into listening to this record with the intention not to compare it, and give it its room to breathe, and let it be its work of art, and kind of see how you feel about it after that, and then if you want to compare it after that, for sure, go ahead. I mean, it's obviously by the same band. You're going to want to make comparisons. But the way I was talking to my girlfriend about this yesterday, like, it's not like when I go into an art gallery or to see like, an artist that I like art show, I don't walk in and look at one painting and go, yeah, it's pretty good, and then go to the next one and be like, well, compared to this one,
it's not as good as the last one.
It's not as good as the last one, because like they're two completely separate pieces of art. And honestly, with, the last three Freether records, they were all kind of this interconnected piece of art. Whereas this one is, even though it's about the same subject matter and like about, things that have gone on in my life, it's still, I feel like it's a separate piece of art.
Fair enough.
That's good. Right.
So this question should be super, super quick. Off the top of your head, I want you to describe this album for new listeners in 3 words. No more, no less.
Let's see. Ooh, this is kind of hard.
Dude.
I know at least like one or two of them. I would say thoughtful,
Okay.
introspective,
Okay.
and realistic.
Ooh. Okay.
All right.
Realistic. So.
Because
Oh.
to explain the realistic. Sorry, I over-explain things a lot.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
Makes for a great interview.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It's to explain the realistic thing is with, like I was talking about earlier with the last record, it had this, big notion of getting better. And with this record, it's kind of about getting older, wiser, and being more realistic with yourself. That like you're going to have bad moments, you're going to have good moments, and it's kind of like, and also coming to grips sometimes with the fact that life is just a fleeting moment in general, and the whole aspect of the bigger picture of everything. And this record is really about just learning how to be realistic with yourself, but to use that as a way to maintain your balance.
Wow. Okay.
All right.
That makes sense. So what is your favorite memory you made while creating this record?
So at Studio 4, where we recorded it, Will Yip, the producer, has this miniature basketball hoop on the door of going into the control room. That's in like the little lounge area where everybody kind of hangs out when they're not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets extremely competitive.
Wow.
To the point where like we were taking legitimate breaks from recording the record for all of us to play like basketball shooting games.
Okay.
And we've never done anything like that before when making a record. And honestly, I think that was some of the most fun times I've had like in years, was just playing miniature basketball at the studio.
Who was the best one?
It got to the Will Yip is the best by far. And then outside of that, I'd say Larry and Justin were pretty good.
Okay.
I actually ended up when I went to the store sometime around Christmas, or like I was like, they were allowing like 5 people in time, and I had to get my brother something for Christmas. So I was like, all right, let's just see what they have at like the sporting goods store. And they had one of those like actual like glass back like miniature basketball hoops, just like the one at the studio. And I was like, okay, yeah, I have to get him this.
It's perfect.
And I like when he opened it, he was like, I knew you were gonna get me this. I was like, I'm glad you knew it, because I just kind of saw it and was like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, now he practices. So maybe next time, if we get to go back to Studio 4, he'll be prepared to take on Will.
Yeah, he'll be a pro.
So for the last couple of questions, we're going to shift away from music and go straight to death row.
Boom.
So if you're on death row, what would your last meal be with a drink?
Ooh. Last meal. Honestly, last meal would probably be something ridiculous, like Sheet's spicy chicken sandwich with like mac and cheese bites on top of it. Something that like I don't have to worry about now, like fucking giving me like clogged arteries, or you know, really making it difficult to like maintain my weight. It would probably be something ridiculous like that, like just something that looks like slop to other people. As for a drink, it would be, I don't really drink that much alcohol these days anymore because I'm just getting older and hangovers are the worst now. But I think if it was my last night, it would be a nice like pint glass of like Southern Comfort 100 proof on the rocks.
Wait, since you brought up alcohol, Hot Mulligan said they made the funny cone game with free throw, right?
Witch's Hat, yeah.
Yes.
Witch's Hat. My God.
We were talking to them yesterday, and they were telling us all about it. I'm like, wow.
Funny cone
Witch's Hat is
funny cone game. I forgot the name of it again. I'm sorry, Tades.
Yeah. We called it Witch's Hat because cones just look like your traditional fucking stupid witches hats, Halloween style. But yeah, it was us and Hot Mulligan were bored one day, like waiting for load in or something, and we were like drinking beers out by the van. I think me and Tates were like drinking like rum out of the bottle.
Oh my God.
And there were all these like cones, we were being degenerates 100%. And there were like these cones by the trailers that they had used to like block off our parking area, and I think we were all just kind of like bored and like, fuck it, let's make a drinking game out of this. And we started like, it was during the time when like flipping water bottles and like them landing straight up was like all the rage in the world for some reason.
That was the thing. Yeah.
I always wondered like what kid did that one day at school and it just spread like wildfire, you know, because that is such a strange viral thing to happen. It's just flipping water bottles. But you know, during that tour, we had been doing that a lot because it was popular at the time. It's like who could do the coolest one, and we started flipping the cones to try and do that. And then that's when the whole game came around. We were like, you have to flip the cone and like land it on another cone, and then you have to like try to keep going. And whoever misses has to take so many drinks. And it just like it ended up spawning out and having all these rules, and it became a game that we played like every day on tour for a while.
I love it.
It was ridiculous. And we've even taught other bands how to play Witch's Hat when we've gone on other tours afterwards.
Yeah.
So us and Hot Mulligan, we kind of spawned a fun tour game out of just being degenerates.
It would have been really awkward if I remember that story wrong and you guys weren't the band that they made the game with.
I was just like, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
No idea
It's Hot Mulligan.
I'd be like, well, that's an awkward way to end this off, isn't it?
No, yeah, the Witch's Hat it's still a legendary game to this day.
Definitely. So if you could live in one fictional world for a week, where would you live?
Ooh, that's a great one. You know, growing up, I was like a huge Harry Potter fan, and that would be like the typical answer that a lot of people would give. But, you know, honestly, lately, I've kind of been like, you know what? I think Harry Potter world would be kind of fucking rough.
Yeah. Well, like, it depends on when
there's
you
a
go.
lot of there's a lot of like underlying issues in the Harry Potter world that like I already kind of like see and deal with, you know, today.
Yeah.
And see it happening today. So I'm like, I've been really thinking about this lately. And I think I've come to like the idea that I really could pick like any like fictional universe to be a part of. I think it would definitely have to be like a video game. And I'm thinking it would be Stardew Valley. I'd be a farmer.
All right.
That's a good one.
And live in like that small town and just like go fishing all the time. That game is such a good slice of life.
It is. I love
agree.
it.
So I've done a best and last question, and every single person that we've spoken to have said that it is the most important question. What's your favorite color?
Green is my favorite color. A lot of people wouldn't guess that. Like all of my like Twitch stuff and a lot of the stuff I own is like purple. I really vibe with purple a lot, like aesthetically. But green has always been and will always be my favorite color.
All right.
More so like emerald green.
Ooh, that's a good green. It's a good green.
So as I said, that's all the questions we have today. Is there anything that you would like to plug?
Honestly, I hope that people enjoy the record, give it a chance, and I hope that anyone that relates to it or has gone through any of the same things I have can just know that they're not alone. And if they ever want to reach out to me, that is totally fine. It's nice to know that I can write songs about my life and the things that I go through. And then when people relate to it, it also makes me feel a lot less alone. So I just want to let people know that if they relate to it, I'm right there with you.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for now. This has been Cory from Free Throw and Really Good Noise podcast.